All right. Hello, everybody. These are people that are in the chat. We're going to get started. I'm going to start off with a little introduction with my channel, what my channel is normally about, and then why I'm doing something different today. So, my name is Phoenix Vandale. My channel is normally about different topics that are not traditionally covered in churches and where they're found in the Bible. Kitty, stay down there, okay? And usually I just kind of present the biblical evidence for those and kind of leave the conclusions to the listener. So just kind of present things I've found in the Bible and present those to people. But throughout time, with my kitty Minna, she's kind of jealous, likes to spend time with me. Okay, let's see. My notes here can't tell how many viewers we got yet. If you guys make it in, say hello in the comments so I know that you're here. Otherwise, assume that I'm speaking to myself. Okay, so what is the topic today? The topic is, was Christianity originally structured to be an underground movement? And when I posted the different links to this online, people were like, my Bible doesn't say that. That's crazy talk, all this type of thing. And that's kind of what I expect as the initial response to that idea. And I just want to present what makes me think that might be correct. This is more of an opinion video, which is why I went to live stream, is because instead of presenting just biblical passages and ideas, and I'm kind of presenting a personal opinion. So therefore, I wanted to be able to have feedback from other people and see what they had to say and respond to some of the questions. First thing is, this isn't really going to be talking about the church, shall we say. It is talking about Christianity, but I think you'll understand why I wouldn't call it the church. We'll start off with first of all religions change according to the culture they're in, and whatever they were set up as at the beginning, each culture changes a religion, and the religions adapt to the culture that they're in. Whether that's good or bad is for you to decide, but I'm not really talking about Christianity as it is today. That's really not what I'm talking about today. First of all, let's talk about tradition a little bit. Colossians 2:8. See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather according to Christ. For if Colossians 2:20-22, for if you died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world, why are you living in the world and submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not touch, do not taste, which all these things are destined to perish with use in accordance with the commandments and teaching of men. reading this again, just kind of think about the enmity that or the enmity is the best word. The how opposite the world and the church are supposed to be. Jesus himself said that if the world loves you, the love of the Father is not in you. For a servant is not above his master. If they hate the master, they will hate the servant. I did a video on that. I may reference a lot of different videos that I've done. Those are available on my channel for you to peruse at your leisure. Matthew 15:9. In vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Wow. When I hear all that, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men, first thing that comes to my mind is that we are required to worship on Sundays. That's just what comes to my mind. Let's look at the traditions that they got from the apostles. This is my first live stream, so just gonna have to come on. When it talks about traditions, 2 Thessalonians 2:15. Therefore, brethren, hold fast and steady the traditions which you are taught by the word by our epistle. So they were teaching traditions. Come on. In 3:6, they talk about traditions as well. Let's look at all right. So these are the traditions that we're supposed to be following. Ephesians 2:20, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. So his teaching is supposed to be what we build everything off of. So if we have traditions, they need to come from a basis in the teaching of our Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus. Okay, so I want to read up a bit on ecclesia, okay, which is the Greek word for what is defined by the church as church. So we use the term church, but I want to explain a little bit what the word actually means. Understanding the definition of ecclesia is an important component in understanding the church. Ecclesia is a Greek word defined as a called out assembly or gathering. is commonly translated as church in the New Testament. In Acts 11, they say that they met with the ecclesia in Antioch. 1 Corinthians 15:9, Paul said that they had persecuted the ecclesia of God, or the called out assembly. The word in the New Testament was also used to refer to assembly as people. In his address to the Sanhedrin, Stephen calls the people of Israel the assembly, ecclesia, in the wilderness. So he was referring to Israel as ecclesia. So it couldn't have been the modern idea that we have of the word church, because he's referring to Israel. In Acts 19:39, ecclesia refers to the convening of citizens to discuss legal matters. In most contexts, the word ecclesia is used to refer to the people who Christianity defines as the New Testament church. So let's look at the foundation of what Jesus has laid. Now, I guess I'm going to do this without people watching. Well, I'm just going to do it. Matthew 13:10 through 17. The disciples came to him and said, "Why do you speak in parables?" He answered and said to them, "Because it is given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, the more will be given, and he will have abundance. He who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, for seeing they do not see, hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled. Hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of these people have grown dull, and their ears hard of hearing, and their eyes have been closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For surely I say to you, many prophets and righteous men desire to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. So apparently Jesus purposely obscured the truth. Is that right or wrong? Obviously, if it comes from our Messiah, I would say it'd be correct. The next thing I have on here is what are the, if we have an underground church, what are the things that would define that? Not being obvious about everything that you believe, and there being a restricted number or a smaller number. Matthew 7:13. Enter by the narrow gate, because broad is the gate and spacious is the road that leads to destruction, and there is many who enter through it, because narrow is the gate and constricted is the road that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Narrow and constricted is the way Jesus defines the road that leads to life. Do you see any constriction or in modern Christianity, or any way that it would be defined at modern Christianity as narrow? Luke 13:23 through 25. Then one said to him, they asked Jesus this question, "Lord, are there few who are saved?" Listen to what his response is. And he said to him, "Strive to enter by the narrow gate, for I say to you, For many, I say to you, will seek to enter and will not be able. What does it say there in that passage? There's people who will seek to enter and not be able. For once the master of the house has risen up and shut the door, you will begin to stand outside the door and knock. Lord, Lord, open for us. And he will answer to you and say, I do not know you. Where are you from? So they're seeking to be saved. They're asking to be saved. And the response is no. Is that ever the response to somebody who is seeking salvation? Is that something modern Christianity ever does? It doesn't appear to be our place, but it appears to be the master of the house's place. He will turn people away. The idea that God turns people away who are trying to be saved, I don't think I've ever heard that in a church. One thing about growing up, I always used to have this instance that I'm going to read in John 6:53 through 71 as an example of when the church or the group gets too big. Jesus had an overwhelming crowd of people descending upon him. His response was to them, most surely, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is food indeed, my blood is drink indeed. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread which came down to heaven, not as your fathers ate the manna and are dead, but eats this bread shall live forever. What was the response of that statement? Therefore, many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a hard saying, who can understand it? And when Jesus knew in himself that his disciples complained about this, he said to them, does this offend you? What then if you should see the Son of Man ascend where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life, and the flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life. But there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were who did not believe and who would betray him. And he said, therefore I have said to you that no one can come to me unless it has been granted to him by my Father. And from that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. And Jesus looked to the 12 and said, do you also want to go away? He winnowed out the church, or the ecclesia, the gathering, the called out ones. He winnowed it down to the hardcore believers. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, whom shall I go? You have the words of eternal life, and we've come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him and responded to him, saying, did I not choose you the 12, yet one of you is the devil? He spoke of Judas Iscariot, knowing who would betray him, being one of the 12. Well, I guess this will be a lot shorter than I anticipated if nobody is going to have questions. Okay, let's just keep going. I hear, do not judge. so that you will not be judged. For by what judgment you judge, you will be judged. By what measure you measure out, it will be measured to you. And why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the beam of wood in your own eye? Or how do you say to your brother, allow me to remove the speck when the beam is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the beam from your own eye, then you will be able to see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So it's not saying don't remove the speck from your brother's eye, but make sure to fix yourself first. And another saying, there was a bunch of sayings in a row, and one of these sayings was, do not give what is holy to dogs, no, or throw your pearls in front of pigs, lest they trample you with their feet and turn and tear you into pieces. If you don't judge, how do you determine who's dogs? How do you determine what's holy? How do you determine what's pearls or what's pigs? How can you follow this passage if you have no discernment, no ability to judge holy from unholy, dogs from cows, sheep from goats, pigs, the unholy creature, dogs, the unholy creature, or they're unclean according to their laws. So how do you do that? The ecclesia structure in the gospel, let's look at that a little bit more. What Jesus who was the cornerstone, should be the basis of our teaching that we build upon, right? That's what was said in Ephesians 2:20, right? That Christ was the cornerstone to which we build upon the house. So what does Jesus say? This is Matthew 24. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and the disciples, saying, the scribes and Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses. Therefore, do and observe what they tell you, but do not do as they do. They tell others to do something, but they do not do it themselves. They tie up heavy burdens and put them on people's shoulders, and they themselves are not willing to move a single finger to move them. They do their deeds. Why? In order to be seen by people. Does that define modern Christianity? Is the organization known as a church doing deeds to be seen by people? For they make their religious ornaments broad and their tassels long. How about Christian bumper stickers? Could that be like a phylactery? They're an example of something that's being done to be seen by others. Put the big old Christian fish on your car to note that you're a Christian. That'd be a modern example of making their phylacteries broad and their tassels long. Well, the phylacteries are just a religious ornament that carried words of significance for the Jews. And they loved the place of honor at banquets and the best seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called rabbi by people. Rabbi, teacher, or pastor. What does Jesus say about wanting to be called teacher or pastor? It says, but you are not to be called rabbi, because there's only one is your teacher, and you are all brothers. Does that look like modern Christianity? one teacher, or is there 400 teachers for each person? Each person can find the teacher that they fit to. He says, "You're all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for there is one heavenly Father. Do not be called teachers, for there is one teacher, the Christ." So what does he say as opposed to being teachers? He said, "And the greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. He who humbles himself will be exalted." How does that match with modern Christianity in the picture? So if you had a church where there was no rabbis, no teachers, but everybody was equal, would that be an above ground church, or would it be an underground church? Because there's no organizational structure. How do you have a vertical relationship with God? Because each one of these, do not be called rabbi, because there's one teacher. You're supposed to look up to the Father, and do not call each other Father, because there's one Father. So instead of teacher, we're supposed to go to God. Instead of Father, we're going to God. Do not call teacher, we're supposed to go to the Christ. All vertical. There's not a pyramid. There's not levels in this. Okay, so now I'm going to get to the verses that I expected people in the chat to mention, which nobody did because nobody's in the chat. Nobody's watching. Okay, so what about the Great Commission? So first of all, in Matthew 10:6, it said, "Go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Matthew 15:24, "I was not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So at the end of Matthew, they were given permission to go out in the world. As you go, you are to be preaching. Let's talk about all the passages that I got tossed at when I mentioned this to somebody that I respect. Okay. No man, when he light a candle, put it in a secret place, nor under a bushel, but on a candlestick, so they may see the light. Now, is that talking about having an organizational structure, or is it talking about your good deeds, your fruit? Because how are we to be judged between good fruit and bad fruit if we can't see the fruit? Salt and savor says the same thing. Salt is good, but if the salt loses its flavor, how will you season it? Have salt in yourselves and have peace with one another. Okay. Example of being salt and light and being different from the world. I think the first one that comes to my mind is Acts. Ananias and Sapphira, which you probably don't know the story. They lied to one of the apostles there about what they did, and they died and got killed right there. And they dragged their bodies out because they lied to God. But the response in the community is what I want to focus on. And after this happened, they dragged him out, they buried him. And through the hands of the apostles, many signs and wonders were done among the people. And they were with one accord in Solomon Porch. The next two verses. Yet none of the rest dared join them, but the people established them highly. Okay, so the community was fearful of them because they heard this story. They realized how important it was to serve God. And in in the midst of that, believers are still being added to the Lord, both men and women. So they had a pure gathering because they truly serve God as worth their life to serve God. Okay, talking about knowing them by their fruits, right? So these people that were around, these people who died, realized that being a Christian meant their life, was more important than their life. Matthew 7:15-20. Beware of false prophets, for they will come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You shall know them by their fruit. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, and every bad tree bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree can bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown in the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you shall know them. We have to honor God in a way that people can tell we're honoring God. This passage comes to my mind, or it did when I wrote this, let's put it that way. If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will call from heaven, forgive their sin and heal their land. Does that mean that we need to change the land, make the land we live in holy in order for our land to be healed? No. It says only the people who are called by his name need to humble themselves, pray, and seek his face and turn from their wicked ways. It's only the, quote, believers that need to honor God with their actions for God to heal their land. God didn't care whether you were in Rome, wherever you were. It's his people being pure that matters, not the land around it. And the gathering, the called out group, the ecclesia, met in houses in Acts 2:46, 5:42, 8:3, 10:2, 12:12, 16:32, 16:40, 18:7, 20:20, Romans 6:5, 1 Corinthians 6:19, Colossians 4:15, and Philemon 1:12. So it was mentioned to me that, well, what about the elders? So I want to read a summary of a thorough study of elders in the Old Testament community is too complicated. Let's see. There are three different categories of men in ancient Israel designated in the Old Testament as elders. The Hebrew term is zakunim, or bearded ones. It does not include passages that refer to them just as old men as opposed to boys or children. The category of elders is first mentioned in the biblical text as elders of Israel. It sometimes is consisted of 70 men, Acts 24, Numbers 11, which was a representative body for the entire nation. This body is said to be like the Sanhedrin, became the Sanhedrin after the Babylonian exile. The second category of elders is a group of administrative advisors, elders of the king's house, or the elders. 2 Samuel 12:7, Genesis 24:2, 57, 1 Kings 12:6-15, Psalms 105:22. This body faded away after the fall of Jerusalem. There are 14 clear references to city elders. Deuteronomy 19:12, 21, 2-8, 20, 21, 19, and 20, 22, 15 through 19, 25, 7, and 9. I put in the pinned comment where to read what I'm talking about, elders. The main point of the article is that these were not authority roles, but they had a different purpose than part of a leadership structure. So I suggest you read that. Just, click on what I commented and put it into Google and you can read it. In Revelation, the called out believers, ecclesia, were in groups of cities. We never talked about, when it talked about division in the Bible, it didn't present having multiple organizational structures as a positive thing. Where's that? I have to look at this. First Corinthians 3. And I, brethren, speak to you as spiritual people, but as to carnal babes in Christ. For I fed you with milk and not solid food, and you're still not able to receive it. You're still not able. You're still carnal. Why are you behaving as mere men? For one says, I am of Paul. Another of Apollos. So like, I am of A church, B church. I have this. Paul is my pastor. Apollos is my pastor. All these others. It doesn't seem that Paul is honoring the organizational structure they're taking for themselves. We're supposed to, it says, who is all these people? The Lord gave to each one. They each did their own job. He who plants is nothing. He who waters is nothing. God gives an increase. We are God's fellow workers. Just as Jesus said, right? We're all brothers. You are God's field. You are God's kingdom. Grace of God, Master Bill, he says he's laid the foundation, but that's not correct. Because Jesus Christ is the cornerstone. He is the foundation. He is the thing which you use to build, you plumb line, like in everything else around that. That's the foundation that we have is Christ, and we build upon that. So, I wish you had some people in here to give me comments. I would like to answer questions.